Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, September 2nd, 2021. My name is Emma Figland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, James Risen, best-selling author and the Intercept's senior national security correspondent, to talk about Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court broke its silence on Texas's near-entire abortion ban and bounty law in a single paragraph, refusing to enjoin the obviously unconstitutional law for semantic reasons about procedure in a 5-4 vote. But they left the door open to rule it unconstitutional later. However, it may be a bit too late, as Texas abortion clinics are under attack as we speak. At least 14 people have died in New York and New Jersey as record rainfall from Hurricane Ida pummeled the region. Mass flooding in public transport and homes underscores the desperate need for climate action and infrastructure. The United Nations warns that emergency food distribution in Afghanistan will run out by the end of the month, leading to a rapid increase in starvation unless nations replenish the UN storehouses quickly. Thousands of children, teachers, and school staff in Arizona are being forced into quarantine and are getting sick as COVID outbreaks sprout up throughout the state, which banned mask mandates. Shocker. 3 officers and 2 paramedics have been charged in the death of Elijah McClain after he was placed in a chokehold and injected with ketamine when walking home from a convenience store with iced tea. Here in New York State, the legislature extended the eviction moratorium to January and expanded rent relief after the Supreme Court, that wonderful institution, nixed it on a federal level. And lastly, a bankruptcy court ruling has dissolved, Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, ordering the Sackler family to pay billions of dollars for addiction programs, but protects them from almost all opioid-related liability and maintains much of their wealth. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We have a packed show for you today, in my humble opinion. Lots to get to. And not good news on the Supreme Court front. Let's dive into that right away. So late Wednesday night, the Supreme Court broke its silence on allowing the Texas abortion law to go into effect. They had already basically allowed it to happen, but now they wanted to put it in writing. The vote was 5-4. Chief Justice John Roberts joined the minority of the 3 liberal justices. 3 of the 5 justices in the majority were appointed by Donald Trump: Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. The majority, they hid behind procedure. The procedure wasn't proper, they said, in terms of the filing to stop this law from going into effect. The filing wasn't appropriate. Does anyone actually think that if this law was threatening capital or was dangerous to moneyed interests in any way, that they would have gotten hung up on procedure? I think not. But this is where they choose to do it, in a nod to anti-abortion activists who have been putting pressure on the apolitical justice, Amy Coney Barrett. So as a reminder about this law, the Texas law bans abortion after 6 weeks, which is essentially a complete abortion ban. 85 to 90% of abortions in Texas happen after those 6 weeks, according to the New York Times. The legal threshold set by Roe is 22 to 24 weeks. So if you're the Supreme Court and you already know that that is the law, and this is what you're choosing to to rule on. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. Another egregious part of this Texas law is that it essentially creates a bounty system for regular private citizens who don't need to live in Texas or prove any standing, meaning prove any harm or injury caused by someone's abortion, which I don't even know what that would be. What harm you would be would be caused to you, especially if you think abortion is murder of the fetus. You would think that was the harm being caused to the fetus, but regardless, what it really is designed to do is open the door for right-wing groups who have a lot of money to sue these abortion providers. And they get $10,000 and their legal fees entirely covered under this law in Texas for free if they win. They get their legal fees entirely covered and $10,000. So they're creating an incentive program for people to completely decimate these abortion providers and sue them out of existence. And also just go after doctors. Here's a quote from the New York Times piece on this, which was very extensive. They spoke with Dr. Jessica Rubino. She's a doctor at a clinic in Austin Women's Health Center. And she says, if this was a criminal ban, we'd know what to do, or we'd know what this is and what we can and cannot do. But this ban has civil implications. It requires a lawyer to go to court. It requires lawyers' fees. And then $10,000 if we don't win. What happens if everybody is sued, not just me? My staff is nervous. They've been asking, what about our families? Because yes, you could go after staff at these clinics, nurses, people aiding and abetting an abortion. That's what this insane law states. This insane, obvious law, obviously unconstitutional law, unconstitutional in many ways, including that standing aspect. You can't just sue. Anybody and everybody can't just sue based on abortions being provided. You have to prove injury. But the Supreme Court decided they didn't feel the need to stop this law from going into effect. And by the way, doctors are required to report every lawsuit filed against them when renewing licenses or applying for hospital admission privileges. So this will hurt doctors in terms of their record. With all of that said, here is Jen Psaki responding to this and saying what Biden will or will not do about what's happening right now.
Obviously, in Texas, with the law with regard to abortion, the president said in a statement he will protect and defend Roe versus Wade. How does the administration plan to do that?
Well, we put out a statement from the president this morning, but let me just reiterate some of the key points, and I will, of course, answer your question. As the president said this morning, this extreme Texas law blatantly violates the constitutional right established under Roe v. Wade and upheld as precedent for nearly half a century. It will significantly impair women's access to the health care they need, particularly for communities of color and individuals with low incomes. It also deputizes private citizens to bring lawsuits against anyone who they believe has helped another person get an abortion, which might even include family members, healthcare workers, front desk staff at a healthcare clinic, or strangers with no connection to the individuals. This further isolates individuals who are facing this tough choice. And I would note, for those of you who didn't see, people who report, for these private citizens could get up to $10,000 for reporting somebody who is seeking an abortion. So our focus and the president's focus is to reiterate our deep commitment to the constitutional right, of course, established by Roe v. Wade nearly 5 decades ago, and to continue to call for the codification of Roe, something that the president talked about on the campaign trail, the vice president talked about on the campaign trail, and this highlights even further the need to move forward on that effort.
Right. And everything she says there is true, and a reiteration of kind of what I explained about this insane Texas law. But the solution is a nonsensical one, because the White House is not pushing for filibuster reform. Without filibuster reform, this is one of the many things that cannot happen, Roe v. Wade being enshrined into law. The solution is something that the Biden administration will never, ever touch. The solution is expand the court. The solution is expand the court. The number of justices on the Supreme Court is not in the Constitution. It has changed multiple times throughout history. I believe at least 5 times it's changed. Don't quote me on that. But it has changed multiple times in this country's history. And similarly to the number of representatives in the House of Representatives that used to change by population until it was arbitrarily stopped at the start of the 20th century. We could change the number of Supreme Court justices because you want to know who isn't playing by the rules? It's the Republican Party. If the justices can do this for abortion, they can do this for every progressive policy priority. I'm talking Medicare for all. That's a significant danger. If we want, as progressives, for that to be kind of our gold standard of policy to achieve in the next years and the coming years, and make sure that we are organized behind that effort, the Supreme Court is an enormous obstacle for that remaining as law, because this isn't going away. I want to read this quote from Sotomayor's dissent to underscore why this is necessary, because this isn't going to change. These are lifetime appointments. The court's order is stunning. Presented with an application to enjoin a flagrantly unconstitutional law engineered to prohibit women from exercising their constitutional rights and evade judicial scrutiny, a majority of justices have opted to bury their heads in the sand. Well, this is just who they are. The court has rewarded the state's effort to delay federal review of a plainly unconstitutional statute enacted in disregard of the court's precedents through procedural entanglements of the state's own creation. Yeah, they rewarded Texas for creating these blatantly illegal obstacles that are meant to do just this, to destroy abortion providers and anybody who aids and abets an abortion, and already just cut off the ability for a great majority of women to have an abortion. And this is also a design for other states to follow suit, and the Supreme Court just gave them the green light to do that.
I would recommend Matt Karp's piece, How Abraham Lincoln Fought the Supreme Court in Jacobin, because, you know, I think court packing is great. And if we could get Democrats on board with it, I'd love that. We have to, I think, fundamentally just get rid of the concept of judicial review in general. If Congress passes a law like Obamacare, it's constitutional. And this extra, like, BS from these, you know, robed, freaks,
yeah,
they just should not have the importance that they do in our country. Like, if Congress votes something in, it's in.
I couldn't agree more. But, like, in terms of realistic solutions for the next few years, I don't see abolishing the Supreme Court as, you know, something that's going to happen. But I agree in terms of the makeup of judicial review and the body in and of itself. So in terms of long term, Matt, I'm on board. But in terms of something the Democrats can adopt, we see Mondaire Jones. He's talking about expanding the court. There's got to be more momentum behind this.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I just think, like, my problem is, like, they seem about even now. Okay, we have some Democrats doing it, but, like, leadership, like you said, like, they're not going to touch us with a 10-foot pole. So it's also not really a short term.
So then, to bring it back to Jen Psaki, okay, cool. Then talk about filibuster reform. If that's the one, like, if you are serious about enshrining Roe in law, there is only one path. So get serious about it, or stop opining, because I don't want to hear it. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will be joined by James Risen.
Thank you, Emma. Hey, today's sponsor is BetterHelp Online Counseling. They're giving our audience 10% off their first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. BetterHelp gives you access to your own fully licensed and accredited therapist via phone, chat, or video. Now, sure you're aware, if you've attempted to go see a therapist, therapists elsewhere have long wait lists. Sometimes it can take you weeks. Sometimes it can take you months before they can see you. But when you sign up with BetterHelp, they match you with a therapist based on your specific needs, and you'll be communicating with them in less than 24 hours. A lot of people found telemedicine to be very helpful, particularly therapy during COVID. And I suspect there's a lot of folks who are just going to stick with that. I found it much more convenient. Obviously, a lot of stress coming out of a pandemic, a lot of stress during a pandemic, a lot of stress when there's not a pandemic. Therapy has been extremely helpful for me. It's always helpful to speak to someone. And once BetterHelp connects you with a therapist, if you find that it's not a good fit, you can switch to a new one at any time for any reason with no additional charge. They have thousands of licensed therapists from all over the country, so they have therapists with specialties that may not even be available in your area. BetterHelp also tends to be more affordable than therapists that you'd find through traditional means. You don't have to have insurance to use BetterHelp, and they have financial aid options for those who qualify. BetterHelp is giving everyone in our audience 10% off your first month when you go to betterhelp.com/Majority Report. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/Majority Report. You can find the URL in the description of this video or podcast and check it out.
We are back, and we are joined by Jim Risen, best-selling author and the Intercept's senior national security correspondent. Jim, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And we should also mention that you are the director of the Press Freedom Defense Fund, which is a part of the First Look Institute, and you're going to be hosting a virtual event with retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman on Wednesday, September 15th, and the event is free. We will put a link to sign up for that event in the show notes at majority.fm, but it sounds incredible based on what you were describing to me in the break.
Yeah, our fund is trying to help journalists in both Belarus and Afghanistan, and so we're trying to get some attention for our work. So thank you.
Of course. Thanks for coming on to talk about Afghanistan, because I want to have a bit of a post-mortem, not to actually use any awful pun there, but I want to reckon with it because it was deemed the good war by far too many Democrats. President Obama spoke in that way as well. And your work has chronicled why that's really just not the case in an incredible way. So let's just start there from a 30,000-foot view.
Yeah.
The Afghanistan war. The good war or no?
No, I mean, it was a lot like Vietnam. It was on the outer edge of the American empire. It was just as much as Iraq, I believe it was a war of choice. We made a decision to invade a country that only had a tangential relationship and a brief relationship to what should have been the central focus after 9/11, which was to capture or destroy the leadership of Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden and the leadership of Al-Qaeda had received sanctuary in Afghanistan in the late 90s and into 2001 from the Taliban, which then ruled Afghanistan. The immediate US invasion dispersed Al-Qaeda. Bin Laden fled famously at Tora Bora in December 2001 into Pakistan. After that, the rationale for the American involvement in Afghanistan became very, very vague and fuzzy. We stayed in Afghanistan and basically became embroiled in an Afghan civil war between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance, which was the coalition of minority ethnic fighters from minority ethnic groups who were battling the Taliban, which is based in the Pashtun, which is the largest ethnic group in Afghanistan. And so that was really the story for the next 20 years was we were in a civil war, somebody else's civil war. And
right.
We kept acting like we weren't in a civil war, but we were. And as you know, civil wars are bloody and grim, and this one was no different. The only, we brought high technology, military technology to this war, and we treated it kind of like a beta test bed. The same way Hitler used the Spanish Civil War as a test bed for modern military technology. And that's awful comparison to make, but I think it's apt. We turned Afghanistan into our plaything for the military.
Right. Which included a torture regime, which you spoke about and you wrote about.
One of the first things we did was the CIA created a torture chambers in Afghanistan. First, we partnered with Afghan warlords who had switched sides many times, including, I mentioned in the story, Abdul Rashid Dostum, who was an Uzbek general who had fought for the Soviets, fought against the Soviets, fought against the Taliban, fought for the Taliban. He had been on every side possible. And he worked briefly with American Special Forces. And at the same time, he was capturing thousands of Taliban troops and then stuffing them in metal containers and suffocating them and burying their bodies in mass graves. All the while he was on the CIA payroll and working with US Special Forces. The Bush administration and later the Obama administration didn't want to investigate it. And instead, he became a hero in the movie 12 Strong, which came out a couple of years ago. And so it just is part of the long string of lies about Afghanistan. We wanted to make it into some heroic thing. As you said, Obama called it the good war. And it was really a sad commentary. It was about American politics more than anything else.
Can you expand a little bit more on the CIA's role throughout Afghanistan? Because, of course, we often when we hear about the CIA or we get what the CIA wants to hear, it's leaked to some intelligence reporters strategically, but we don't hear a ton about the role in Afghanistan and even the role in the withdrawal and the narrative surrounding the withdrawal. So could we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think Afghanistan, in a weird way, transformed the CIA as much as the CIA transformed Afghanistan. Prior to the War on Terror, the CIA was, in the 90s, primarily an intelligence gathering organization. In the War on Terror, it became a military organization, a supporter, basically what they called support to the warfighter. It became a killing machine, targeted killing. And that first started in Afghanistan with the drones. They ran the drone program for the most part, especially in the early days in Afghanistan. And at the same time, they were targeting basically villages from drones. They were also setting up torture chambers, and they used Afghanistan as a platform for torture for the entire War on Terror. It was one of the first places that they had secret prisons to bring people to from all over the world and torture them. And they did that at the same time they launched the Predator drone program and later the Reaper drone program. And they were primarily using, especially in the early days, very kind of basic targeting information based on cell phones. And they would target Afghans, Taliban people based on their cell phone numbers. And often they would fire a Hellfire missile from a Predator or from an order an airstrike from a US aircraft that would hit a wedding or some other gathering where the cell phone number they targeted happened to be. And then they would constantly deny that they had killed any civilians. And so it was very difficult for the press to ever hold them to account. But the Afghan villagers knew what was going on. And then they also set up something that had been in disuse since the Vietnam War, which the CIA calls Ground Branch, which is a special forces supplementary organization, which is CIA officers who work directly with Delta Force and other special forces on the ground. And they often conducted what you call night raids in Afghanistan and Iraq, where they would burst into someone's home and then shoot everybody in the house or capture them and take them off to some prison for interrogation. Those night raids, and coupled with drone strikes, played an enormous, were enormous factors in the resentment among Afghans to the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan.
Right. And obviously, I would imagine that led to significant radicalization among groups that would probably not have a favorable view of the United States. I am borrowing from Iraq here, but we were not greeted as liberators as we're droning weddings and knocking down people's doors in the middle of the night.
Right. I think the fundamental problem we had was we allied ourselves with a minority group, the Tajiks and a few other northern ethnic groups who were part of the Northern Alliance, the group that we went into Afghanistan with. The Pashtun were part, as I said earlier, of the Taliban were part of the Pashtun. Pashtun has over 40% of the population of Afghanistan. The Tajiks, who are our most reliable partners, were just about a quarter of the population. And so the government that we set up was heavily slanted towards the Tajiks, especially in the early days. They held most of the powerful ministries in the early days, and the Pashtun, were brought in, but they were kind of never felt, I don't believe, that they were really in charge. And so the Taliban played on that, and it looked to a lot of Pashtun like it was a northern government against the southern-based Pashtun plurality of the country.
So I guess let's go back a little bit to the Bush administration and talk about their pretty much brazen ignorance about some of the ethnic gradations and the dynamics on the ground, including the installation of Hamid Karzai, which led to rampant corruption, including a heroin trade.
Right. Yeah, one of the interesting things, the Taliban have rightly been accused of benefiting from the drug trade, but so did the U.S.-backed government. And in fact, the Hamid Karzai, who was the first president of Afghanistan, who the United States installed early on, largely because they thought since he was Pashtun, that would be a nice sop to the Pashtun community, although he was from a pretty minor tribe and he wasn't considered a major Pashtun leader. But when he came in, one of the things he did was install his younger half-brother, Ahmed Wali Karzai, to be essentially the viceroy of southern Afghanistan. His official title, I believe, was deputy governor of Kandahar province, but that didn't explain who he really was and what his power was. He had enormous power for years over southern Afghanistan, and that meant he controlled the roads in and out of Afghanistan with Pakistan. And so he could control, in large measure, the Afghan heroin trade, which is enormous. I think Afghanistan today produces more than 80% of the world's heroin supply, and most of it is in southern Afghanistan, or a lot of it is. And so Ahmed Wali Karzai became the boss of the heroin trade, and the United States knew this. The Drug Enforcement Administration had evidence of Ahmed Wali Karzai's control over the business, but the Bush administration didn't want to do anything about it because they didn't want to upset the Karzais. They didn't want to get sidetracked in what they would consider being sidetracked from their essential counterterrorism role. But it was a total lack of understanding of the corruption that was growing in the new US-backed government. And that was yet another reason why so many Afghans turned against the Karzai government and later the Ashraf Ghani government, because the corruption was so endemic and so built into the whole system that nobody trusted it. And it explains, I think, in large measure, why the Afghan army just collapsed overnight, because nobody felt any connection to the US-backed central government.
Right. And a lot of that corruption was aided by the flood of US money coming in that went into that heroin trade, went into the corruption, and of course went to defense contractors, which we can touch on as well, not necessarily to regular Afghans. Talk a little bit about that, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I think the statistic that I think explains everything wrong about our involvement in Afghanistan is that we spent $145 billion on reconstruction in Afghanistan over 20 years. And the Afghan gross domestic product, as recently as 2019, was only 19 billion. If you do the math, that means our reconstruction was flooding and overwhelming and essentially the Afghan economy and turning it into this surreal bubble that made no sense whatsoever. And add to that the drug cash and the massive amounts of funding for combat operations. And you have this river of cash, American cash, flowing through there. And, you know, the temptation for corruption was overwhelming. And so one of my favorite stories about Afghanistan is about how the founder of the Kabul Bank, which was the largest bank in Kabul after Karzai took over, basically he bought an airline just so he could move cash rapidly out of Kabul into Dubai and secret bank accounts for all of the powerful Afghans in Kabul. And they allowed him to keep doing it because they were all benefiting from it. And so they looked the other way until his bank just totally collapsed because he had drained all of the depositors' money into his own secret real estate operations in Dubai.
How much of the perception of America was just like, these guys are rubes? I mean, they're flooding the country with cash. We're able to use it for our own ends, and it's really just about working the system there in order to get rich or invest in what I want to do. Like, because probably the Bush administration was so overwhelmingly focused on Iraq within not minutes, but basically right after getting into Afghanistan, there seemed to be no interest in creating anything sustainable, and thus it just was a slush fund that there's zero respect for what the Americans were trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, you got to remember that for Afghans, they've been at war basically for 40 years. And so war is their main industry. And taking advantage of foreign countries to get involved in Afghanistan is a long-standing tradition there. The Soviets, us, the British, and so this is basically how they knew how to make money, was scamming foreign countries trying to get involved in their war. It's a very sad commentary on Afghanistan, because it could have been done in different ways, but I think the first major mistake by the Bush administration was that they didn't really care about Afghanistan. They invaded it almost because they felt they had to, because that's where Al Qaeda was at the time, but they were never invested in it. They immediately wanted to go invade Iraq. In 2002 and 2003, they moved virtually all the key military assets out of Afghanistan so they could start the invasion of Iraq. And the Taliban had been dispersed by late 2001, early 2002. And the US just pulled out, basically thinking, well, the war's over, when the war wasn't over. And they installed this government with Karzai as its head, but then never really did any oversight, any supervision, and just kept pouring money into it. And Congress I think most people in Congress were afraid to say anything about it because they didn't want to look like they were doves, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. So they just kept writing these massive, massive checks for nothing. And it's one of the weirdest phenomenons in American history, I think, that to let that go on for 20 years is just unbelievable.
And it's to certain people's benefit, right? We touched on it a bit earlier, but it certainly benefited a certain class of defense contractors and very wealthy people in Washington.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the major benefit of the war on terror has been to enrich, to make real estate in Northern Virginia skyrocket in value, and in Southern California, the people. Like I mentioned, Neil Blue, who runs General Atomics, which makes the Predator and the Reaper. I mean, there's just the numbers of contractors who have benefited, and subcontractors in Afghanistan is just it's mind blowing, really.
Right. Let's move to the Obama administration a bit, because of his decision to surge in Afghanistan while Biden was advising against it has been in the news because of Biden's decision to complete the withdrawal of Afghanistan. What is your view on that surge and what it did to our continued involvement in the war in Afghanistan?
Well, I think it's probably the most cynical decision of the entire war because as you said, Obama tried to call this the good war. And why was he calling it the good war? Well, because in the 2008 presidential campaign, he was emphasizing his in Iraq. And he won the Democratic primary, at least in part because he was more anti-Iraq war than Hillary Clinton. But during the general election, he knew he had to cover his right flank and not look like a dove. And so I think he made a very calculated decision to start saying that, to criticize the Bush administration for not devoting enough resources to the Afghan war while diverting resources into Iraq. And so he promised that he would increase the scale of US involvement in Afghanistan if he became president. And I think when he got into the White House in 2009, he didn't really have a strategy for what he wanted to do in Afghanistan, but he had made a political promise during the campaign to increase US involvement. So he did, and he increased troop levels to 100,000, far higher than they'd ever been in Afghanistan before. And there was no real strategy for what they were going to do there. They just sent a lot of Marines and soldiers into southern Afghanistan, into Helmand province, which was the heart of the Taliban and the heart of the drug business. And they got involved in a lot of very inconclusive firefights and lost a lot of Americans. There were more American deaths during the surge than in any other time during the war. And one of the problems was, the Taliban had a sanctuary in Pakistan that they could retreat to whenever they wanted to avoid a U.S. invasion like this. And so it was very inconclusive, and Obama essentially gave up on it after a couple of years and then began to draw down U.S. troops. And it was really pointless. And I really believe, I don't know if Obama would ever admit this, that the only reason he ever did it was because he had promised it on the campaign trail.
Isn't it interesting that He also promised to close Guantanamo Bay, which he made some effort. But what campaign promises are very easy to fulfill, and which ones are not as easy to fulfill?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think Obama, I believe, spent his entire presidency on national security matters just frightened of right-wing attacks. And he never got over the fear of Republicans outflanking him on the right and claiming that he was too dovish. So I think his entire presidency on national security was really a continuation of the Bush administration in many ways. And he focused, he was more liberal on domestic policies, but his national security policies were really very Republican.
Right. And so then, of course, we maintain our presence in Afghanistan. The slush fund continues. Talk a little bit more about how things looked during the Obama administration and even into the Trump era, where we just were in this holding pattern of propping up this corrupt government with our money and with our resources and not necessarily having an exit strategy in any meaningful way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the weird things that happened, they had to have a new president after Karzai. And so they had this long process of trying to find a successor to Karzai. And one of the weirdest things was that the U.S. ambassador, the man who basically ran U.S. Afghan policy over all of the administrations, really, he's had a role in Afghan policy beginning with the Bush years, and then later, he's still been involved. This is Zalmay Khalilzad. He thought about running for president of Afghanistan after being like a U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan. And so you had this weird convergence of U.S. involvement, basically almost taking over, a U.S. official almost trying to take over the Afghan government.
They're taking the colonialism a little too far there, a little bit too far.
Right. Instead, Ashraf Ghani, who is funny, I mean, he was in Washington for years before he became president. I used to meet him before he became president. I used to meet him at a Starbucks in DuPont Circle because he was working in DuPont Circle in Washington. And then suddenly he became president. And so it was kind of a joke. I mean, the whole Karzai succession was a joke, I thought. I mean, I think Ghani had no power base in Afghanistan. And so I don't think anybody really took him seriously there. And so that he went in claiming that he was going to reform things, reform the corruption that had been endemic under Karzai, but it just got worse because he had no power, basically. He had no support. And I think Ghani's presidency, more than anything else, he became an empty suit. And that led I think that was the green light for everybody in Afghanistan who had any power to begin to loot everything they could get their hands on, because I think they began to realize this isn't going to last. This is too good to last. The money is too good. This guy is such an idiot. And the Americans are such idiots. And so Ghani never, I don't think he could control anything. And so you saw the rise of warlord militias again under Ghani, who began to control large chunks of Afghanistan that were supposedly controlled by the government, but they were actually controlled by individual warlords. And they began to control roads in and out of key cities. And they were charging bribes just to move your truck from one city to the other. And so the corruption got much worse because the central government really had very little power under Ghani. And so it was no surprise that he booked out as soon as he could.
Right. And it's no surprise that the Afghans had zero respect for this kind of government. And so that's why despite I think we praise Biden a lot on this program for the withdrawal, the framing of blaming Afghan people for not fighting for the country, I guess, is a little problematic because of all of these preconditions that you discuss.
Right. I mean, I think they were caught. If you were in the, I really feel badly for basically the one lasting thing that we did was we created, with all that slush of money, we created essentially an urban middle class or urban professional class in Kabul and in a couple other cities like Kandahar. And so those people are really caught in the middle. I mean, they wanted a Western style government. They wanted to keep a pro-Western society there. But they were overwhelmed by this corruption, by the fact that the army was a hollow shell, and that there was no real government outside of Kabul besides these militias. I think Ghani essentially became the mayor of Kabul, and that's one of the sad things about it, is the rest of all our money really turned Kabul into a major city with a major professional class, but the rest of the country was still back almost where it started.
You touched on Pakistan a bit earlier, and I wanted to ask if you could expand on its role as kind of a double agent, trying to back its own interests in their standoff with India, which has lasted decades, and also kind of maintain its public support for the United States in this effort. If you could just talk about their role here.
Yeah, I mean, Pakistan created, in large measure, the Taliban, or at least they were a supporter of the Taliban all along. The Pakistan has a large strain of Islamicists in its military and national security apparatus, and particularly the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence service. And there are a lot of Pashtuns in Pakistan. And so there's a natural sympathy and support in Pakistan for the Pashtun and for the Taliban, and for related groups like the Haqqani network. A lot of people forget that the United States supported the Haqqanis back in the 1980s.
Right.
The CIA worked with the Pakistanis in the 1980s against the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. So a lot of the warlords who were fighting for power in the 1990s after the Soviets left had been on the CIA payroll. The Taliban emerged from the civil war in the 1990s as the rulers of Afghanistan. But a lot of those other warlords had stayed around. And so there was this assortment of mujahideen and Islamicists and Pakistani intelligence agents that had this weird toxic mix in Afghanistan at the end of the 90s into the early 2000s. And the Pakistanis were right in there with the Taliban from day one. And so to think that they were not going to be supporters of the Taliban, they weren't going to provide them a sanctuary, was just a misreading of the situation. And so the United States, when we got involved in Afghanistan, we knew, Afghanistan is really hard to get to. It's landlocked. And so you had to send US military supplies through Pakistan or airlift them through Central Asia. And it became a very difficult situation for the United States because on the one hand, Pakistan was providing a logistical network to get the military supplied, and was also providing intelligence about Al-Qaeda and related groups. But that meant that the United States didn't feel like it could talk about Pakistan's support for the Taliban. And when the war changed from its initial focus on killing or capturing bin Laden and al-Qaeda leaders, and into a more direct role in the Afghan civil war between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance, then I think we kind of lost the thread with the Pakistanis, because they were supporting the Taliban and the Haqqanis, and yet they were also letting our supplies go through their country. So it was a very weird situation that was unsustainable. And ultimately, after the raid on Abbottabad against bin Laden, they began to choke down on our supply lines, and we had to send a lot more U.S. military supplies through Russia by trains and then into Central Asia, which had its own political problems. And so the idea that this was something that we could keep doing forever was just never made any sense.
And lastly, I am struck by how the events at the Kabul airport really just crystallized so much of the war in Afghanistan, because of course ISIS-K, suicide bomber, the United States retaliates and kills at least 10 civilians, including many children in that total. And then you have someone like H.R. McMaster coming on television saying, well, we don't necessarily know if ISIS-K was working with the Taliban. A little bit of a Iraq war thrown in there, but also just everything you described, this complete misunderstanding of factions. What was your response in seeing how things unfolded and some of the events that I just described?
Well, I've been very angry at the way the press has covered it, because maybe I expect too much from the media, which since I've been in the media for so long. But I mean, all of a sudden these people discovered Afghanistan. Mm. It's like, oh, there's a war going on there? I didn't realize that. Oh, there's something going on at the airport. Oh, that doesn't look good. I wonder what that means. I mean, that was the level of understanding of most of the cable news and press. Like, oh, I've got to get to Afghanistan. Oh, I wonder where it is. And I wonder what happened over the last 20 years.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. So I began to throw up my hands. That's one reason I wrote that story that I did, was because I was so fed up with the moronic, ridiculous, stupid level of reporting about the last few weeks. It's one thing if you've been there for a long time and or at least you've covered it for a long time and you understand the dynamics. But to walk in there and say, I'm really brave because I'm walking around an airport. It's just stupid.
Yeah, and to me, it just the emotional reaction by the press was based on zero understanding of everything that you talked about over the past half hour, and also one that just was so clearly a honestly childish response to the display of America's hegemony and might not working and the failure. And that is something I have zero place for, or that should have zero place in our press, and yet it's ubiquitous.
Right. And one of the things that I've told people is, if you want to cover the withdrawal from Afghanistan, if you want to go to the airport, okay, fine, go to the airport. But you should also send a camera crew to Wichita, Kansas. Go to a McDonald's or someplace else. Go to a high school and talk to the boys who are not going to have to go to Afghanistan because Joe Biden pulled the troops out. Talk to the boys who are not going to die there. Because that's the other side of that story.
Show the coffins.
Well, no, show the boys who are
that too, right.
playing football and who are not going to go to Afghanistan and are not going to die.
Right. I couldn't agree more. Everyone should read Jim's incredible piece in the Intercept. It's a great deep dive and covers much more than we were able to even talk about here. And of course, look into that virtual event with Alexander Vindman. And it's on Wednesday, September 15th. And you'll find the link in the notes and at majority.fm. Jim, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will wrap things up. We are back. That was such a great interview with James Risen. He couldn't be a better reporter to talk to about this very topic. Really insightful and just, not just insightful, but great at summarizing and getting the big picture themes, of course, that he's covered for so long in Afghanistan.
And a guy who's faced intimidation from, for instance, the Obama administration for doing journalism.
Right. He used to be at the New York Times, and now he is at the Intercept and has written, I think, at least 4 books. So people should check out his work everywhere it is. Now, let's turn to what happened here in New York and in New Jersey and in other areas, Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, last night. Last night, we now know that at least 14 people have died in New York and New Jersey due to the downpours and winds from the remnants of Hurricane Ida that came up to the Northeast after just devastating Louisiana and other areas. And there was immense rainfall and shocking images of subway systems flooding and basically cars floating through Park Slope and other areas of Brooklyn. So the new governor of New York went on CNN last night to talk about the devastation, and Kathy Hochul, the governor who stepped in after Andrew Cuomo resigned, she had a curious thing to say about what happened last night. And I don't think it's just a slip of the tongue. I really think some people think this way. Listen to this and see if you catch what I'm talking about.
Again, we're still restoring power. It's dangerous when there's live power lines out there. So I would just urge people to sit tight, let us do our work, let us continue cleaning up, and we'll let everybody know when it's all over again. And this is one for the record books. They'll be able to tell their grandchildren that they witnessed something that some have said only happens every 1,000 years. I haven't been around that long, so I don't know for sure, but that's exactly what people are describing this as unprecedented.
This happened last month. This same shit happened last month here in New York. We are in the midst of these events happening more and more frequently due to climate change. This is not some anomaly. This is a part of a precipitous increase due to climate change, and areas like New York that are surrounded by water are going to feel the effects of it. We're seeing what happened in Louisiana. Fortunately, the levees and the infrastructure there was improved in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, and so some of the effects were able to be stymied, but That's not the case for many areas of the country who didn't have a fortified response due to a hurricane, like New York, and like, of course, poorer areas, which are going to be affected the most. Saying that is very ignorant, and also doesn't jive with what she needs to do as governor, because people may not realize. So you saw the 28th Street 1 station there, which used to be my old stop when I lived there, like being flooded with water. The MTA and the subway system is controlled by the governor. It's not controlled by the New York City Mayor, Bill de Blasio. She has a responsibility to invest in that now and make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I truly, truly feel for the houseless population that felt these effects last night and may have been in some of those subway stations that were 10 feet filled with water last night.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing about the 1,000-year flood is stuff that I've been hearing my entire life in North Dakota. I'm just looking through the list of Red River floods. So 1950, largest flood of the Red River since 1861, so that was in 1950. Let's skip a little bit ahead to when I remember 1997 Red River flood. This made national news. Most severe flood in Manitoba's Red River Valley since 1852. That caused huge damage in Grand Forks, North Dakota as well. And you just look at how fast these major floods come up, 1998, 1999. Every year that I went to Minnesota State University of Moorhead, actually it's not every year, but 3 years in a row, from 2009, where we had the fourth highest flood on the Red River in Manitoba since 1862, 2010, 2011, those 3 straight years were years that my spring semester had extended breaks so that instead of going to class, we can go help sandbag for the once in every 1,000 years flood that we are experiencing. So we are so special, guys. We get to experience all this 1,000-year stuff, often multiple times in a decade. And it's really, I think, yeah, I mean, that's the problem is, I mean, I have really big beef with Hochul because she's saying she's not endorsing anyone in the primaries, and what she's saying is she's not endorsing India Walton, who is the Democrat for mayor in Buffalo.
Won the primary.
That's the only Democrat running for on that ticket. There's the ex-mayor is going to run a centrist spoiler ticket, and Hochul's staying out of that. So this whole notion of this 1,000-year flood, this comes from a people who are, if we let them just have their way, they are going to make sure that more and more people suffer like the sort of thing that happened in New York last night with floods, or it happened in Louisiana with losses of power. Like these corporate austerity politicians are going to get us killed.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a slip of the tongue, because I do think she has an investment in portraying this as an anomaly, as some sort of event that will sit in our rocking chair and tell our grandchildren about.
That whole class does.
Yeah, instead of rocking chairs, we'll be in rocking canoes, because we'll all be underwater at that point, and that will become the norm, not the anomaly. And so, I mean, this is a serious story and people died, but I have a little sports reference. It reminds me of how everyone's a generational talent coming out in the draft, right? It's once in a generation, this quarterback, and somehow every year someone's a generational talent. That's basically what it echoed. But Hochul, Andrew Wiggins, generational talent. The next LeBron, who was the generational talent before him, and round and round it goes. Trevor Lawrence, generational talent after Joe Burrow being the generational talent before him last year. But regardless, Hochul, with these comments, not necessarily off to a good start in this area in terms of her response. We need to invest heavily in infrastructure here in New York, in our transportation system, to protect from these kinds of effects. And of course, on the national level, the climate provisions in the infrastructure reconciliation bill have to be emphasized and pushed forward, as well as the hard infrastructure, because one can't exist without the other.
Kate Aronoff always says, if you're not for the Green New Deal or even more expansive sort of action, then you're a climate denier. But really, if you're not supportive of this $3.7 trillion deal, at the very minimum, let alone like a specific Green New Deal, not only are you like a climate denier, but you are actively creating a world where more and more of this sort of weather disaster carnage affects people more. Like, you're creating a world where, you know, our subway system's completely falling apart multiple times a year, and people have to like swim out of it.
Don't you mean once every 1,000 years?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know how old I am. I mean, it's really nice how you can see. I would like to see some of like the solar phenomenon, like or planetary phenomenon that's only once every, you know, few thousand years, but somehow it's harder to speed that up.
A meteor, the subway system flooding multiple times a year and increasing in frequency. Somehow that's the same thing. All right, folks, we are going to head into the fun half, but first, Matt, what happened last night on Left Reckoning?
Going to admit Brandon and Matt while
Oh, wonderful.
So that we had a great conversation. So the UK is the Unite, which is one of the biggest, I think it's a group of unions in the UK, is going back to the shop floor with a election of a new sort of more kind of Jane McAlevey type of organizer. So we talked about that with Stella Rooney, and then domestically we talked about SB8 in Texas, as well as this sort of faux populism about anti-masks in this time of, you know, they're fighting tyranny of masks, of having their kids wear masks in this moment where you know, even the eviction moratorium is being slashed. We're deputizing people to surveil the girl down the street in case she has a pregnancy she doesn't want to carry to term. We're cutting unemployment benefits. So we talk about like tyranny. We talked about that. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Also in the post game, I kind of saved it for I guess a little bit mercenary, save it behind the paywall. But I talk about when Brett Weinstein tried to cancel me last year.
Whoa.
Yeah, I tell him to kiss my ass. So if you want to hear me say that, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. And also we'll clip it for YouTube next week.
I don't even got to pay for it. I just heard you say it, Matt. You just literally said it.
Well, I mean, I say it more elaborately.
If you want to hear the details and contours of the cancellation and the response, you got to go behind the paywall.
I forgot how mad I made.
What happened to liberal America, you know?
I know, right? What fucking sellout. Hey, Brandon. Hey, Matt. What's up, guys? What's up, Doc? How you doing? What's happening over on Doomed? And, of course, Discourse. Now both talk simultaneously and talk over one another.
Sounds good.
Since you asked so nicely, I have no problem with doing
we're just gonna have to do
frankly,
that.
I'm just glad to be dry.
I mean, we
it
could
was
just talk
pretty
about
rainy
whatever
last
you'd like,
night,
and we could. Right. I'm in Queens. So. Why don't you go ahead, Brandon?
I stopped because it was annoying.
Why don't we switch it up, and why don't you go first? There you go.
Okay, I will go first, Matt. Thank you. No, I stopped because it was reminding me too much of what I hated about Hamilton, all of that like crosstalk shit. But no, I'm just happy to be dry, happy to be here. I'm happy I didn't get swept away in the flood last night, although I do not actually float because I'm so dense. I sink like to the bottom like a rock.
All right, cool. We know you work out.
Well, I mean, that was more of a fact about what happens when you work out as much as I do than about me working out. But anyway, so yeah, we actually didn't have a chance to record last week due to John's illness with COVID. But luckily he is doing better. And so we should be back on schedule this week. So that was a really long way to say I have nothing.
Okay. Matt, what's happening over on Doomed?
Well, first, I'm in Queens, so we were really hit yesterday. Last night.
Are you guys all okay?
We're okay here, but out of the 7 of the 8 deaths, I believe, in the tri-state area, Queens makes up 7 of the 8 deaths in the tri-state area. So that's sad. I had water coming in through my walls, and
Jesus.
I'm on the 6th floor too, so it's not like. There's clearly some sort of leak that water was getting through. So I spent the night cleaning up water puddles all over my living room and bedroom. But anyway, tonight, youtube.com/Matt Binder, 9 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be live. And I will be having on the show Dr. Eric Osgood. He is a doctor who was previously with that now controversial group, Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance. They're the group that has now become a little bit controversial, more than a little bit controversial, for promoting ivermectin. Brett Weinstein is a big fan of them, I believe. I know that the main doctor, Dr. Corey, who runs that group, has been a guest on Weinstein's show. But Dr. Osgood left very publicly because he disagrees with what this organization has become and how they've been using ivermectin. I'm going to have him on the show to explain what's going on, what's the problem here, and to give the lowdown on, people taking horse paste and people trying to get the real version of ivermectin that humans use and whether it even works for COVID and all that.
Can we just touch on that a little bit, Matt? Because the thing is so I do agree that there are certain people that get really annoyed when you just meme it as horse paste because they're like, well, it actually has this human applicability, right? And the problem with that is it's not approved and there's not evidence for it. So people are going to their doctors and their doctor's saying, no, I'm not going to give you that, even if Joe Rogan fucking had it. And so they're saying, well, where can I get that? And that's why you're seeing these pictures at sort of vet stores saying, hey, you need a picture of you and your horse if you're going to buy this stuff.
right. When people,
it's a real sad state of affairs. It's not funny.
I wonder if people are buying really realistic photoshops, like they're buying the fake vaccine cards to
There's a new industry.
Right. Can you get me in a nice photo with a horse so it looks like I own him, so I can get myself some ivermectin over the counter at the horse feed?
I mean, it have to happen at least once.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. And I had last week's show, I had a caller call into my show, and it started to break this week actually, but he told me well before it made the news outside of Brazil. But apparently there is there's been a study on a venom found in Brazilian snakes that apparently looks like it can be used in some way to fight COVID. And obviously, when they do that research, they're discovering things and figuring out how they could use it for humans, if it could even be used for humans, or even injected in a way that people, whatever is in the venom, not the venom itself. Obviously, there's something in the venom, but and I made this joke, that there's going to be eventually, if this gets out to these people, they're going to be all getting bit by venomous snakes in hopes to cure themselves of COVID, which I'm sure will cause a whole new problem. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine?
I cannot imagine. I try not to imagine people just wrapping themselves like Florida Lance vipers in order to cure themselves of a respiratory disease. But that might be where we're heading.
All right.
Right. And with that, we head into the fun half. Matt, can you handle calls? And I'll handle
it.
Yep. There we go. With teamwork. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what?
What?
Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Back. Binder was in the midst of telling a tale about how water was flooding in. You can continue if you'd like.
Yeah, it was just weird because like we have those. I'm on the 6th floor, which is the top floor in my building, and we've had a leaky roof, like ceiling issues before, but that wasn't the case this time. So I wasn't expecting any problems when I was looking at the roof and not seeing anything, and all of a sudden I look at the floor and there's a huge spreading puddle in my living room and the water was seeping in. We have like air conditions that are inserted in the wall, like in the wall air conditions, not the ones that sit in the window, and one in the bedroom, one in the living room. And the water was pouring in through like, I guess there's like a small gap or crack in the wall, but in both rooms. Right under the air conditions, and water was just pouring in. This has never happened before. I mean, granted, we just moved to this building last November, so this was the first summer here, but hasn't happened all summer. So I have no idea what happened, but it was just, people got a lot worse, obviously. But to me, the crazy thing was not being anywhere near a ground level, and this water was just pouring in through the walls.
Yeah, I mean, flooding wasn't really a big issue in my area either. Luckily, I think pretty high up. But seeing that tornado warning was freaky because, like, it's one thing to see that in North Dakota because, like, I've seen a bunch of it and it's like, okay, it's not going to hit anything, right? Because there's, like, not a lot of people. You see that going either through the Bronx or Queens. That is horrible. I've never thought to even imagine a tornado here before. Yeah. That freaked me out.
We actually had a tornado back in, I think it was like 2012 or something in northeastern Queens, where like, but it obviously because of how the houses are, it's like a more suburban area of Queens, northeastern Queens. But like, it's a bunch of houses, but they're all tightly packed, so like you can't actually see it like form or whatever. But they officially declared it a tornado, and like trees would just lift out of the ground, and it was crazy. So it has happened here before, but just not with that visual impact of like seeing the funnel like you saw this time and like by the New Jersey Turnpike, that video that was going around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one touchdown in Annapolis too, right? There was a lot of damage in Maryland from a tornado.
Yeah, there's people saying that their clouds were spinning above Central Park, which is like, if that happens, we're at the apocalypse.
Oh yeah.
I was just watching The Day After Tomorrow. Classic disaster
Classic,
movie.
yes. Well, yes, that was instructive to me at a young age because of Jake Gyllenhaal. But...
And I think, frankly, like all the criticisms about how this won't happen overnight, like I feel like maybe that got overdone a little bit because it's happening, maybe not overnight like that, but I feel like it's not. It could have been farther off.
Now, maybe it was just me because I've been sort of out of it the past couple of weeks, but this was not expected last night, right? Like I had no idea. I just saw the rain. I was like, oh, regular rain. And then all of a sudden it was just like torrential downpour. Was this something they were expecting?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was to this extent, but I think it snuck up on us a little bit.
I saw some frustration with people saying, like, I was trying to tell people, take this seriously, but yeah, I definitely was not one of those people taking it seriously. I was just like, oh, this is annoying. I guess I'll try to bring an umbrella to work.
Kudlow's Trojans slope. Keep us in your thoughts, crew. My wife is to be induced and deliver our first child today. I have tested negative twice in the last week, but as of right now, I'm the only person without COVID in our house. Ugh. Side note, love the work you guys do. Significant in my transition from libertarianism towards leftist. Solidarity forever. That's awesome. And of course, keeping your wife and your whole family in our thoughts today.
Absolutely.
Cattletown Napper, this law won't just affect Texans, will it? It will help someone go out of state for the abortion. If you help someone go out of state for the abortion, you will be a target. People talked about taxi drivers as a target. Yes, bus companies, airlines, and train companies would be by the same logic, possibly even hotel companies under the same logic. I mean, yeah, the broadness of this is clearly insane. I don't think it'll stand up to scrutiny once the court eventually, they left the door open to deal with it. They just weren't going to do an emergency stay on the law. But yeah, it's deeply troubling. That part of the I could see them restricting abortion, and I think it's actually quite likely for them to uphold this Mississippi 15-week thing. But everybody has standing to sue abortion providers or anybody who abets an abortion. That's so clearly illegal that they might try to split the baby. No pun intended, Jesus, with that law. When they rule on abortion. Alex J's 58 or 485. Hochul's response is totally just diversion. No governor wants to actually do the hard work of refurbishing the whole subway system because it's inglorious and whoever starts it won't be able to cut the ribbons. That's a good point. Jimmy Carter's Solar Co. Given your daily mention of the Gowanus Canal in the show intro, it'd be cool to bring someone on from the Gowanus Canal Conservancy. They and other NYC environmental groups do amazing work on stormwater mitigation and habitat restoration in the city with way too little support from the city and state. That's actually that's a really good idea. We'll earmark that. Cower with Crowder. The snake venom thing wouldn't be too weird if the anti-bad/mask hogs. Remember, we have snake handler Christians in this country. That was what you were talking about earlier, Bender.
Right. Yeah, that I still think it's gonna eventually. If that story gets any bigger, I mean, I've seen English I think the AP or Reuters reported it yesterday for the first time. So if that news catches on before there's any sort of more specific news about what it could do, I fear that people will start doing crazy things like that.
We're going to get a lot of amateur, hepatologists, snake experts, whatever you call a snake expert.
Yeah.
Popping up in the next few
with
weeks.
that said, we probably should get to Rogan, right? I mean, that's fairly significant news. Joe Rogan has COVID. If anybody has heard, he posted this on his Instagram story. He says he contracted COVID-19 while on the road, and it was unclear whether or not he is vaccinated. I guess it's still unclear. He may be withholding that information for purposes of maintaining the audience he's so carefully cultivated, specifically in recent years, and it's become more and more this kind of audience. But he did reveal that he's taking a variety of things, including ivermectin. Let's take a listen to what he had to say on his Instagram story, and then we can talk about it a little bit more.
Hello, friends. So I got back from the road Saturday night, feeling very weary. I had a headache, and I just felt run down. And just to be cautious, I separated from my family, slept in a different part of the house, and throughout the night, I got fevers and sweats, and I knew what was going on. So I got up in the morning, got tested, and turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything.
So, by the way, when he talks about Regeneron, is that what he said? Or yeah, whatever the monoclonal antibody treatment that he was receiving, that is incredibly expensive and really hard for regular people to access, but he has a ton of money, so he's able to, one, sleep in a separate wing of the house, separate part of the house, and then have a Regeneron treatment that he, God, is that the name of it? Whatever. The monoclonal antibody treatment that he received, which is not accessible to a lot of people. And then, of course, he promotes the famed, infamous ivermectin, where people are taking it on a regular basis and shitting out their intestinal lining.
Wait, can we just go back to the clip about him?
But if you think about it, though, he probably has the legit like human version, because he obviously probably has a doctor with the hookups, right? To get the actual.
We'll hook him up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so
everybody else.
He's not taking the disgusting horse paste. He's taking the actual ivermectin that humans can take that has no clear COVID-19 effects.
Seems like a bit of overkill though, because like, you know, not to minimize having COVID, but I had COVID, and you know, I didn't just like go out the moment I got it and was feeling shitty and just start taking literally everything in the drugstore. So it's kind of weird that he's like, you know, goes from being this holistic guy who you don't really need to get vaccinated, because like if you're young and healthy or, you know, fit or, you know, practice karate or whatever, you can, you know, you'll just like ride it out. But the moment there is some sort of like magical cure out there, suddenly you should be taking it even if you're not sick, because that'll prevent it or something. It's a very like weird pivot to make.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you play that clip of him talking
Yes.
about his vaccine, how he says like it's crazy to get the vaccine if you're healthy?
Right. Let's play this clip. And I should mention the Regeneron thing actually works, but the rest of the stuff, that's actually medicine. And so is the vaccines. Vaccines work too, but this was how he presented and framed the vaccine conversation.
Here's my main problem with it. There's a lot of people that have gone through COVID already, and they have natural immunity, and they're telling them they have to be vaccinated too. But that's not logical. It's not rational, and it's not supported by science. This doesn't make sense.
No, none of it makes sense. And Trudeau just announced the other day that all government employees essentially were going to have to be vaccinated to work.
What about government employees that have gotten COVID and recovered?
Exactly.
And have antibodies?
But also, you can't say you can only have a job, i.e., you can only survive if you get this vaccine. I mean, why is this legal?
Well, not only that, it's not really a vaccine in the traditional sense. A vaccine is where they take a dead virus and they turn it into a vaccine and they inject it into your body so that your body fights off. It develops the antibodies, and your body understands what that is, whether it's the measles or polio. It knows how to fight it off. This is really gene therapy. It's a different thing. It's your body. It's tricking your body into producing spike protein and making these antibodies for COVID.
Yeah, that's not what that is. And by the way, that's him on with Megan Murphy, who is an anti-trans activist. So clearly,
also, if your issue. Right. The good person to have on for medical expertise, right? But you know, if the mRNA vaccines are the real issue, if that is your issue, that you want the traditional vaccine. Yep. I mean, that's the Johnson & Johnson one. There is one like that. Go out and get that one then.
It's insane. Like, yeah, that's such, like, there is a non-MR vaccine, because all Rogan is interested in is the fear mongering, the fear factor of it, right? Like, that's what.
Well, he'll eat a scorpion, but he's not gonna take the gene therapy mRNA vaccine, right? Like, dude, as you say, Matt, just take the J&J one or advocate for just the Johnson & Johnson one on your program. I will take that, but don't loop all of the vaccines in the same group or whatever, right? If he wants to make that kind of statement.
You're gonna act like you're so precise about how you classify
exactly, and then don't just like say you're throwing the kitchen sink at everything in your body when you are at the same time on your programming advocating for precision in treating a novel coronavirus, which we now know is mitigated to great effect by these vaccines, which have now been taken by hundreds of millions of people. But really what he's doing is appealing to the narcissism of his viewers who want to feel like they have the access to the secret knowledge and different treatments that circumvent what the general consensus is telling them, and then it provides them with some sort of semblance of agency. And if he has taken the vaccine and is still doing all of these other things, which like we don't necessarily know, it makes it a bit more unconscionable that he's not being upfront about it.
I don't want to come down too hard entirely on like the idea of folk science or like folk medicine or like herbalism or something. But to me, this strikes me as incredibly inconsistent. Like if he had said that statement, when we just watched, and then had like once he contracted COVID, gone into a yurt and like meditated for 5 days and was like, yeah, no, I sweated it out. I don't believe in pharmaceuticals. Like, we just took a bunch of like mushrooms and we just sweated it out. And now I feel, better about the whole thing. I know you can have a respect for that kind of consistency. This is just like people who think they believe in science sometimes, but like don't really, but really just want to try like find a middle ground where they can cobble together like this pseudo expertise in what are legitimate scientific fields. I suppose just be like, okay, I believe in herbalism. I believe in like taking echinacea or something. No, I want to like, sort of straddle the mid ground of like, no, I believe in pharmaceuticals, just not the ones that you're being told to take, but, a separate one.
Nailed it. Like, I'm pretty sure ivermectin, we all know ivermectin is produced by Merck. Taking it and purchasing it is not necessarily sticking it to big pharma and doesn't square with a general skepticism about pharmaceuticals or drugs that are manufactured by them if that's what you're going for. All it is a way to carve out some special niche for yourself in the midst of a global pandemic where we need collective action on treatments and vaccinations. And I don't buy anymore that he's just like wide-eyed and taking in all of this information and bushy-tailed and just like naive and having these people on his program because he's interested in ideas. This is a specific project at this point.
I mean, he might be interested in ideas, but only very specific ones, right? You can have a very specific band of ideology that you're interested in, and being, more or less willing to listen to both ends of that narrow span and, with no attention paid to the distribution of how many people are at one end versus the other is not so impressive. Like that's just the entirety of the basis of our kind of like the faux diversity within our political media system, that sometimes we have on literal Nazis and sometimes we just have on people who sort of think that we should cull a population, right? It's the illusion of diversity.
One side and the one other side.
Merck really took one for the team, if you believe this conspiracy theory, though, because not only did they have a drug that apparently could fix all of this if only the dastardly doctors would unleash it, but also they lost the sweepstakes for developing their own COVID vaccine. So they let all their competitors, like, not only do they forego that PR victory of, by the way, check out our stuff that's usually made only for horses but has some human applicability, but we're going to forego that PR victory because, why do we care about that as a pharmaceutical corporation? But we're going to let all of our competitors then develop the real vaccines for this stuff. Like, Merck, real team player in the oligarchy of pharmaceuticals.
I also want to make sure that we don't miss that he also said how if you had COVID, you don't need the vaccine. It's requesting that is not supported by the science, when literally like every legit doctor I've heard has stressed, yeah, if you had COVID, you do have some antibodies, but it's not the same. It's not that same amount of strength you would have. And we don't know when you got the vaccine.
We don't know when it goes away, your antibody protection, and it could vary from person to person.
Right. It's like saying I got the flu 10 years ago. I don't need to get flu shots every year.
Well, they probably don't get flu shots anyway. So
yeah.
And all that is like you can reduce it down to the fundamental component, which is be afraid of the vaccine. And that's what he's messaging there.
Yeah.
Right. It's really easy to find out if these guys took the vaccine. Like, it's super simple. We saw it with like every single like conservative that's come out and wouldn't answer the question. If your audience is a bunch of anti-vaxxers and you won't say you did or didn't take the vaccine, then you took it, because you wouldn't hide that you didn't from anti-vaxxers. That's your base. You want to make them happy. So the idea that like, oh, it's my medical, it's my private. No, these guys would never. If they didn't, all the ones who didn't take the vaccine and have that anti-vaxxer base, they're out loud and proud saying, I'll never take it. I won't take the vaccine.
Yeah. Ryan from Michigan, Joe Rogan, I have COVID, so I threw the kitchen sink at it. Headline tomorrow, reports of concussions due to sink impacts rise nationwide.
Who talks like that when it comes to getting sick? Like, I've gotten sick many a times and I've never thrown the kitchen sink at it. Like, you just like, oh, I got sick. I guess I'll sleep it off and maybe take some like Tylenol, or maybe I got to go to the doctor and get like, I don't know, amoxicillin or whatever they give you. It's been a while. Who the hell says like, I immediately went out and had to get 50 different medications to put in my body. It's so weird to describe it like that.
Well, Matt, Joe Rogan's a tough guy. That's why you can tell, because he's like starting to like age into looking like Dana White. So, when he gets sick, if it wasn't serious, he wouldn't have mentioned it. So he has to really overperform being sick. He can't just have a bit of a cough. He has to like need gene therapy to deal with his bit of a cough. Otherwise, it's, why would he even mention it?
I know when I'm really, really sick, the first thing I do is go outside and film myself underneath a tree. Like, why wasn't that taken in bed if he was so ill? What a weird guy. What a weird guy.
I had a bit of a stomach virus this weekend, and the first thing I did was like just periscope me just over the toilet, like, hey, fans, Chad V here.
I don't know if it was the lighting too.
Like 7-Up, got some saltines here.
I meant to buy saltines, and I forgot. Each time I went to the store, I was like, oh, man.
I don't know if it was the lighting too, and just I guess the way his skin reflected and that bald head, I'm sure helped or whatever. But he sort of looked like deep faked or like a 3D model or something. Something was off about how he looked.
Maybe, that's a great point, Matt. Maybe they have replaced Joe Rogan with a deep fake.
It's the Avril Lavigne situation. It's not her anymore. Yeah. It's they've done what they did with Paul McCartney, and they're doing what they did with Avril Lavigne. It's a replacement, Joe Rogan.
If you play Skater Boy backwards at exactly 3/4 the speed, you hear they've replaced me with a clone in like the track.
Those are my favorite conspiracies. There's
Bloop
one
is
for
a madman. Help us, save us.
There's one for Andrew WK. There was one for the Ultimate Warrior in the WWE back in the day when he left for a few years and he came back. And because he was wearing a baseball cap and had his hair in a ponytail, everyone assumed it could not be him, even though it looked exactly like him, but wearing a baseball cap with a ponytail.
I saw like a little story the other day about like Bruce Willis allowing Russia to deep fake him for commercials. And I think that's probably going to be the bulk of what deep faking is used for in the next 100+ years. Because at the end of the day, what does pretending somebody is somewhere or saying something that they're not really going to accomplish in the long run, except for some very narrow situations where that person has no alibi, like everyone's going to know that Joe Biden didn't give like 8-minute long like rant of like a Hitler speech at a certain point. So it's like it's mostly going to be used like people being de-aged years to be in movies, like Michael Caine looking like a 20-year-old.
I don't know, man. Have you seen like just this past week we had the whole thing where Biden apparently fell asleep while meeting with the Israel Prime Minister? Right, it was fake. I mean, and they didn't even have to like digitally alter it. They basically just cut out a small portion of the clip where he closed his eyes and looked down to listen to the guy and cut it. And like immediately after they cut, he then turns to him and responds. So I mean, people do things like that when they are listening to people.
Yeah, that technology definitely already exists.
Context of the Biden clip. So they just cut off the context before Biden responded.
Yeah, they just basically cut a moment where he decided to close his eyes,
being there for a longer period of time. Like the image of him closing his eyes was in reality not that long, but he like they multiplied it, I guess.
Right.
Technology to like make videos a little bit misleading have existed for a long enough time where people have kind of mastered the bulk of like what they're going to be deceived by. I think the large amount of deepfakes are just going to be like really weird, cool things. I will say, Biden falling asleep in that meeting made me like him more. So in the end, it didn't even work. That's propaganda.
I actually don't think the threat from deepfakes isn't from something like that happening and triggering something like a coup of the government. In my opinion, I mean, I think that's what like the right wants from these sorts of deepfakes. I think the actual utility that powerful people are going to get from deepfakes is when something real actually does come out, they can say, actually, this was a deepfake. And I didn't actually say that. I think that's why I'm wary of like adding to like the sort of freak out about the coming deepfake era. Cause I think really what you're going to see is more often than not, like a journalist releases something and people question the validity of it in a way that only like experts could figure.
I mean, we already have
that's like the good.
We already have like a very basic version of that though, wherever like someone's text messages or like emails get out and they just go like, oh, I was hacked.
That's my account. That's exactly what I thought of. And in fact, that's a great point, Matt. I want to go back in time and make that the reason I was what's what I'm looking for, cautiously optimistic about the possibilities around deepfake, because yours was way more thought out than mine. I was just like, nah, it's gonna be Bruce Willis looking 50 forever.
Let's read a few more IMs, and I'm quite passionate about this Candace Owens story that we can get to. Or maybe we should take a call before that. Delta Blue. Sure. Yeah, Delta Blues. The adoption of using prophylactics like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine to combat COVID has always struck me as odd, given the initial argument against lockdowns with it's just a flu/cold, yet I can't remember anyone ever taking ivermectin if they felt fluish, means of coping with certain current circumstances without acknowledging the 650,000 deaths since February 2020, I guess. Seymour Butts. Fuck. Ellicott City, Maryland had 2,000-year floods in their downtown area in back-to-back years because the first floor was not supposed to flood, I think you mean, was not supposed to happen again for 1,000. A lot of the small shop owners rebuilt and came back. Only when it happened again did the local government decide they need to do some engineering and redesign of the sewer system. And the once vibrant downtown area lost a lot of small shops because this is the new normal that is only getting worse. Rabbit from Boston. I'm sorry, Emma, but your take on Donda a couple days ago was hot trash. It's a good album, his best since Life of Pablo. You just won't accept Jesus in your life. Sad. Yeah, I did not think it gets too religious, and the first song is just Donda, 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 Donda. I mean, I'm sorry. I used to be a huge fan of Kanye, which now sounds corny, but like it's bad.
the moment anyone says it's his best album since Yeezus, I'm like, okay, no, thank you. Nice troll. Troll. That's like putting Jay-Z on your top 10 like rappers list. It's like, okay, good try. Good try. Jay-Z's best album since The Blueprint 3. like what are we even talking about? Come on. Like nice try.
Yeah.
If you're
phoning it in at this point.
Like I understand like what Kanye West is doing. I guess it's at least, he's trying to, experiment. That's
maybe,
fine.
Yeah, he's
In my ideal world, everyone would have not the money he has or ability to hold an entire nation hostage for his experimentation, but they would have the freedom to experiment with art the same way he does, right? But I think the just vast amounts of wealth that he's dropping on these ego trips can really confuse people into thinking they're a little bit more meaningful than they actually are.
He's very much lost touch with any semblance of reality that was on his, the greats of late registration and graduation and all that stuff.
The worst thing you can really say about the album, in my opinion, is that it sounds like his last three. Like that just doesn't sound like, all of the pomp and circumstance that surrounded his production made it sound exact. It sounds no different than the one that came before or whatever.
Aaron is not cool says, wait, is Brandon saying Hove isn't top 5?
Of course not. That's a top 5 what? Top 5 rappers from Brooklyn born in the year he was born in, maybe. But I don't know what evidence there is to support that.
Holy shit!
That's just not a position you can defend. Hove, maybe if Hove stopped rapping after 2000, you could say that. But at this point, the ratio of bad to good, you can't listen to his verse on Monster and tell me he's a top 5 rapper. No, that's delegitimizing that entire verse.
My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, another A+ album of Kanye's, but yeah, his verse on that actually is really bad. Now that you say it, it's definitely the low point. Love, I can't get enough of it. Yeah, yikes.
He just names every monster he can think of. He's like Wendigo, blue, skeleton with a sword and Viking hat. Just looking at it, he pulls out a D&D manual, just fucking Beholder
for episodes of Supernatural.
I love Supernatural. We can if the whole politics thing does not shake out, we can do a Supernatural podcast.
He's on Party City looking at Halloween costumes, and that's how he wrote the verse.
It's just flipping a page in a Pathfinder book. Yeah, whatever.
Reading Goosebumps.
Doulahan? What is that?
All right. So we got a little off track.
Haven't listened yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't listened to Kanye since Yeezus, which I really enjoyed.
I think Yeezus is kind of Kanye's, to compare him to another auteur like M. Night Shyamalan, it's kind of Kanye's Signs, where you can be like, yeah, I enjoyed Signs/Jesus, but in hindsight, it was the beginning of the end. And there were a lot of things about both that like signaled where it was like the artist was going that would make you think that
Yeezus has like
end.
really high highs and some weird lows there.
M. Night Shyamalan like tighten it back up. Good for him.
The M. Night Shyamalan discourse is where I'm jumping in now. I thought Signs was a great movie. I still think it still holds up.
Yeah, it's a movie, a lot of religious undertones, a lot of Phoenix. What happened after Signs?
Lots of, was it Avatar that came after?
No, after Signs was The Village, which is another.
No, The Last Airbender. I mean, sorry. Yeah.
No,
it's like Village and Lady in the Water, and that's.
I think The Village. I think The Village is another really good one, though. I don't think that's a bad movie. I think that's really good.
I watched that. It wasn't as bad as I had thought. It wasn't great, and I kind of got it after a while, but like, it was okay.
I think that ending your movie the way The Village ended is basically the same as saying it was all a dream, and that's like a very like low bar of a twist.
I liked it.
The Happening, guys.
Oh
no,
for me, The Happening is great. The Happening is a banger. But we're not gonna have
for me, The Happening is where he goes all wrong. I actually even like Lady in the Water, if you could believe it. But The Happening is for me. That's where he's just like, ooh, this is a bad movie.
Low point for Paul Giamatti.
The Happening is bad enough to be worth watching. Mark Wahlberg puts in a banging performance as the world's most unrealistic science teacher. It might be my favorite thing that I think I would say Zooey Deschanel is in. Is Zooey Deschanel his wife in that?
I think she's in it, right?
Yeah, but my favorite thing that she's in that's not Pushing Daisies, obviously. And just like it's the lemonade scene with the woman on the porch. You eyeing my lemon drink? That's a classic.
All I remember from that movie is the shot where Mark Wahlberg is getting super close to the plant and going like, "Hey, plant, how you doing?" Like, it's like, and it turns out to be a fake plant. For people who don't remember, the movie's about plants that start releasing whatever that starts killing people. And so I think it's it's where my M. Night Shyamalan completely falls off for me. But then he came back with some good ones later on. The one about the kids who visit the grandparents' house, that's really good. You guys should check that one out. The Visit, I think it's called.
Okay.
And then I can't co-sign that opinion, but it definitely is an opinion.
And then Splice, that was a really good one.
Is that by M. Night Shyamalan?
Yeah.
That's the one that's the sequel to Unbreakable.
Oh no, Split. Splice is the one with Adrian Brody, where he makes his own like daughter out of clonal cells and then like bangs it.
All right, guys, I love this so much, but we probably should move on.
I'm sorry. This might be my fault.
But we do have some IMers who want to write in. Rabbit from Boston. Okay, The Village is trash. Insulindian farm phasmid. I don't know. Signs has a groaner of a last 20 minutes. I do remember when they put the knife under and you see the reflection of the alien. Because I was still reading it says Insulindian pharmacist. Okay. So jeez. That did stick with me. Anyway, let's take a call.
Oh boy.
Fuck. Let's take a call.
814. Emma might have to apologize to a nation of how many billion? Let's go to the phones. 814. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Matt from the communist state of Pennsylvania.
Hey, Matt from the communist state of Pennsylvania. How you doing over there,
That's
by
also
the way?
where M. Night Shyamalan's from, I believe.
I think you're right.
Yes, he is. Unbreakable, my favorite. Hey, the topic that you guys have been covering lately that I find most interesting and really appreciate your commentary on is the sort of left to quasi like alt-right pipeline, like the door to Tucker when leftists start to cross over into like right-wing authoritarianism. And this brings me to Chris Hedges. I credit his book, Death of the Liberal Class, as being like the moment where I began to understand leftist politics. And he's always been hypercritical of the Democratic establishment, as well as Sanders and the Squad and capitalism and electoral politics in general. To me, he seems to walk that fine line of being so far left and so cynical, but never crosses over into that like right-wing nihilism, and is someone that I consider an ally and voice of the left. Not to say I don't have my issues with him. I just wanted to know if you're familiar with his work, your thoughts on him if you are, and if there's any interest in having him on as a guest, because I think the conversation between him and this group on the current state of the left would be really extremely productive and beneficial. And I'll hang up and listen.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mike from PA. I really appreciate the call.
And not to downplay this call, but someone had been wanting to call in with an update from they're in an Ida region down south, and they had an 814 number as well. So I thought that was going to be that person, but I will get to that person after this. So let's get to this.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk to Sam about it. I can't really. Mike, you might have wanted to call in when the boss man was in, but I mean, I'm open to anybody or anything. I know he was like recently, he's been making the rounds, I think. So, but it seemed I don't really follow Bad Faith, but I saw he was on there, and somewhere else, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't follow Hedges' work too terribly closely. I think I read one of his books in like the 2000s, maybe Christian Fascists. I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, that's possible.
All right, let's take this call then, Matt.
Cool. 814. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 814.
This is Sam. I am from New Orleans, unless there's another Erie, PA person sneaking in here.
So how are you doing in New Orleans, by the way?
I'm doing very lucky. My
Wait,
house is all
literally?
right back.
Is that little? I hear water in the background. Are you literally trudging through flooded area right now?
Oh no, I am so lucky. I feel bad even saying what I'm doing. My girlfriend actually has a pool that managed to not get any damage, so it's how I've been staying cool. But I feel guilty, so I was trying to walk away from it.
Well, you guys got no AC, right?
Yeah, no.
So I get it.
No AC, no anything. Yeah, I mean, I do feel a little like talking about Shyamalan, but I guess we'll talk about the things that I have on this list here.
Real quick, favorite Shyamalan movie first.
I just wanted to say that. Well, I just saw Old, and it was just so fun. What if you got?
Wait, no,
really
don't spoil
old
it. I haven't seen it yet. Don't spoil it. Because I want to believe that it's probably aliens or
I won't spoil
ghosts.
anything, but it's fun. It's fun. Yeah. So it's been so hot here. I had a friend from work message all of us, reminding us to keep cold towels around her neck. Her watermelons in her kitchen just started exploding because it was so hot. And that's just kind of like a.
That's crazy.
Yeah, just like watermelons chilling on the counter exploded. But a couple really weird things. So my friends and I applying for unemployment or FEMA relief, we can't get any FEMA allowance because none of us are homeowners. We're all unfortunately renters, so none of that for us. But when I was just filling out my unemployment thing, I had to enter a CAPTCHA, like one of those enter this to prove you're not a robot. I did it correctly 3 times and was denied every time. And my friend doing the same thing had to download a different app to scan her face to prove that it was her. And then it didn't work for her. So she didn't get an allowance. And I don't know if we've both been tricked, but these are the official actual links that we've followed through and are being given the strangest, weird techno hurdles that you would never expect. And as phones are dying and stuff, to have to download a new app to upload pictures of your face to prove that it's you, it's just wild.
Where is this?
This is in New Orleans. The actual website like links, I don't remember what they are, but they were the official website links. I don't have them written down. I actually had the only things I wrote down were some places to donate to that were better than Red Cross or other things that people were interested in that. I should have written down the actual places where we applied and got these like ridiculous, like crazy complications that are not helping anyone. Yeah, I guess I was sorry. That was kind of a ramble, but a little nervous. But a couple of places you could donate to, and then I'll just jump off. there's a CajunNavyRelease.com. That's the Cajun Navy. They're a bunch of locals. They're hanging out, and they are like, they're great. No-hunger.org. That's the Second Harvest Food Bank. My friend is actually in charge of that. She's a hero. And I won't say her name, doesn't matter. And then handsonneworleans.org. Those are all three like really good local places to donate if people can.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. That's good to have that
also,
info.
Absolutely. And more importantly, Splice is a terrible movie. I don't know what Matt is saying. It's horrible.
Wait, Splice or Split? I think he hung up.
You could argue both are not very good. Splice
Splice
is way worse than Split. So.
Split's a good movie. Splice is a bad movie. Split was a good movie, though.
Glass is the sequel. I was like, is Splice the sequel? No.
No. Split is the one where you don't know it's the sequel, but it is, because at the very end, he shows up, and it's clear then that it's all in the same universe and sets it up for Glass.
I haven't seen it.
Spoiler, but
I mean, it's been how many years now? The spoiler.
Right. 4?
I agree with Matt.
Okay. I agree with you in principle, but
I haven't seen the last Avengers movie yet either, but I don't expect everyone to hide the fact that what happens to certain
there's
Avengers.
like a spoiler, especially for movies, it expires for a while. TV shows is a little different.
Well, I mean, the last Avengers wasn't as good. I would say last Avengers wasn't as good as Split. Maybe about as good as Splice.
Okay, we have only gotten to one clip because we spent 20 plus minutes on M. Night Shyamalan.
I could spend another 20 plus minutes on M. Night Shyamalan.
We could, and I part of me might want to instead of talking about Candace Owens, but let's get to that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so Candace Owens is going on this crusade about basically being discriminated against. She went to her Instagram live yesterday because a COVID testing lab refused to serve her. And of course, she goes to Jim Crow. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
This thing, maybe COVID's racist, maybe Susanna's racist. I don't freaking know. I don't know. The last time a white Democrat refused a black person service and said it's because I don't like your thoughts and ideas, we were in the Jim Crow era. But here we are. And we're actually in Aspen, Colorado, and Susanna wants you to know that she will Google you. This virus is not political, but she's Googling people that are signing up for tests to make sure that their politics align with Susanna's. Welcome to the public health crisis.
So when she talks about this woman, Susanna or Suzanne, let's pull up what she screenshotted, which was an email from this private COVID testing lab. Again, I say private because that's exactly what it is.
This is what happens when you privatize these things.
Oh, exactly. I mean, she always can just go and get it from a public testing lab down the street, which is what was suggested to her. I've just learned, this is the email that was sent to Candace Owens, I've just learned of this testing request, and as the owner of this business, I'm going to refuse this booking and deny service. We cannot support anyone who has proactively worked to make this pandemic worse by spreading misinformation, politicizing, and discouraging the wearing of masks, and actively dissuading people from receiving life-saving vaccinations. The only other local testing option is the free kiosk by City Hall. They mail their tests to Texas and have inconsistent result times, do not take appointments, so it's walk-in only midday weekdays in their back alley. My team and myself have worked overtime to exhaustion, unpaid and underpaid this past year, spending our own capital to ensure that our community remains protected. It would be unfair to them and to the sacrifices we have all made this year to serve you, Susanna. So, normally, again, I don't necessarily agree with denying service, but this is a private enterprise. She can go down the street to the local service and get her own tests there if she so needs. And in this specific case, I find it to be quite glorious, and I am amused that, of course, she immediately goes to the only thing she knows how to do, which is compare it to the Jim Crow South, because look, majority white audience, I am the good black person here, and I will validate all of your preconceived notions and completely make it hyperbolic. It's of course the Democrats that are bad.
And she's gonna do a whole like little skit about how her being denied private testing is kind of like the modern day Tuskegee experiments or some shit. But at the end of the day, I mean, I agree that it's bad to deny people medical testing, but I guess what kind of is a much more like like I don't know, foregrounded concern in my head is that like these people really think that it's okay to like spread misinformation, to like do all of this stuff in their basic like public career professional life, but still be able to like navigate the same structures and like, use the same amenities as the people who they are actively demonizing, and that there should be no even like, personal grievance, because that's what this is. This is a personal grievance somebody has with the way that that person in their life is like actively making their job worse, their life harder, killing people that they know when they're working with, ideally. And like whether or not that is like legally allowed or should be allowed to like, like discriminate based on that sort of like, I guess, explanation is one thing, but like the idea that they still think that they should just be allowed to like go about their life and utilize the services of these people without them like disliking them to this extent is just surprising. It's less like Black people being denied things in Jim Crow as so much as it's like white people in Jim Crow trying to like utilize Black establishments of the people that they're actively oppressing. It's just like, yeah, I guess we should have to serve you, based in like a fair society, but are you not just doing a power play by being here, by trying to be like, I make your life worse, and now you still have to deal with me? Because that's what so much of like the triggering the lib shit is about.
Yeah, and she also, I would imagine, was quite in favor of the cake makers not serving the gay couple based on their religious objections. I'm pretty sure that the proprietor of this private COVID facility would be able to make the same case based on that same kind of framework. So she wants to be able to do what she wants and make her money. She's very rich. She can go to any COVID testing facility that she likes and be completely isolated from the consequences in her real life, as you say, Brandon. It's entitlement on top of just the complete, of course, a history of what she's trying to draw a comparison to.
Yeah, and I mean, like comparing, I would argue that the owner of the establishment is making a much more like specific claim that no, she doesn't even hate Black people, but she hates Candace Owens. Whereas the cake situation, like, they hate gay people, and this particular couple is an example of the gay person they hate. In this particular circumstance, this is like a personal issue that they have.
We also don't know if it's real, we should say.
Yeah, I mean,
she's saying this is the email.
I mean, yeah, there's possible that they just denied her appointment innocent or anything, but I would believe it's real because like if you recognize the person's name, it might lead you to be like, oh, this person's a real, POS. And that's something that as a society, I don't know if we can ever really insulate people from like the consequences of their personal actions or the people that like might take grievance from it. Obviously there's a limit, but when you're going out like actively demonizing an entire field of a profession of people like doctors, immunologists, virologists, like some of them are going to take it personally. And that's something that we have to actually not necessarily allow for, but not completely dismiss when people go like, yeah, but we live in a society. You can't just be out there like making everyone mad and then expecting them to serve you because like you think it's a joke, because that just makes the entire place dysfunctional.
Right.
Me personally, I think I would have requested to be the one to personally deliver the news to Candace when that test came back positive.
A singing telegram? You want to like
right? I would show up to do it. Right. I would show up to do it.
You'd go to her and say, "We are denying you service here."
Oh no, I mean, I would have done the test, and then I would have personally given her those results afterwards if they went a certain way. Otherwise, I would have just said, "Screw it." Just
that's the issue, right? She would have to be positive for you to enjoy the moment.
Oh boy, Candace Owens. I'm sure she's sought legal counsel too to try to make something out of it.
Oh sure. Yes, of course. Oh man, Dave Rubin was on Tucker Carlson last night.
A real meeting of the minds then.
Yeah.
I can only imagine like a combination of like that big brain with that like big sense of humor just like combining and just like really creating like a black hole of entertainment.
Yeah.
They're still recovering from all those high level ideas, I think.
Well, let's get a bit of a taste of some of those ideas. Tucker Carlson, of course, can't stop talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because of his obsession with her, which could be psychoanalyzed by Freudian psychologists for decades and decades to come. He goes after her, says she's never had a real job after calling her for a bartender for many years. And Dave Rubin is right in the mix on that program. What a wonderful thing for our country that this is the top-rated cable news show in the country.
Partisan, their mandate is defined by law. It's to ensure two things: stable prices and stable employment. But beginning this summer, Democrats in Congress have tried to transform the mission of the Federal Reserve. Now, Sandy Cortez, who literally couldn't balance a checkbook, who's never had a real job,
literally
has decided we need to turn the Fed into a vehicle to fight global warming. Imagine a world where Sandy Cortez weighs in on Fed policy or the power grid.
Sandy Cortez?
She does. Quote, "We urge President Biden to reimagine a Federal Reserve focused on eliminating climate risk and advancing racial and economic justice." How's that going to end when people with literally no skills whatsoever, who can't do anything, who couldn't program a microwave, are in charge of the most complex and significant systems in the country? Go back to the Gender Studies Department. You could really break things. Dave Rubin is the host of the Dave Rubin Show. We're happy to have him. Dave, thanks so much for coming on. So it seems like the least qualified people are grabbing massive amounts of power. I mean, massive amounts.
Tucker, for the record, programming a microwave can be a little complex. I've never really understood the defrosting.
A fair point.
It just doesn't make any sense. Like, what's it really doing? But the point is, yes, you are completely wrong.
Oh, shocker, shocker. I mean, didn't these guys support Donald Trump? We're talking about qualifications. We're talking about qualifications. Like,
oh God, Tucker's just, I mean, Dave Rubin's just so funny. I just like skip past laughter straight to crying. You know,
yeah.
I just holding it all in. Oh,
I love the way he Tucker. He gets a little bit of laugh from Tucker, and then he kind of goes back in again. And Tucker's like, "No, Dave, move on from that."
That was the fakest, but like most generous laugh I've ever seen anyone give. Like Dave Rubin, like, very professional of Tucker Carlson. That might be the most acting I've seen him do. Like, ha 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 ha, very funny.
Dave just did 3 minutes on how tough microwaves are to program instead until Tucker gets him out.
What qualifications allow you for, as somebody who's in our government, to make comments on anything, right? I mean, she's pretty qualified in and of itself to have opinions on the government because she's in the government as an elected representative.
If you win an election, you're qualified.
Yeah. I didn't realize that populist Tucker Carlson needed preconditions for everybody who was elected by their constituents, of probably degrees and expensive college credentials to come in as experts and weigh in on things. I thought he was a man of the people in his woodworking shed. Or I don't know, maybe he just wants only a group of deep staters or elitists.
Ivy League
people to be able to
lawyers.
weigh in. They're the only ones who can talk about public policy or make suggestions, I guess.
It's weird because the reason he calls her Sandy Cortez is because, and a lot of conservatives, at least online, do this. It's a way to sort of knock her, because I don't know if you guys remember, but she came out that, you know, she used the name Sandy. She had her friends call her Sandy in college, and conservatives became obsessed with the idea that she wasn't a real working class woman from the Bronx because she went to a nice college in Boston. And, you know, she was, you know, when those videos came out of her dancing with her friends or whatever. So they like used that to sort of demean her by saying she wasn't really working class. But at the same time, he's saying that she doesn't have the education to, or the the wherewithal, the know-how to be in the positions that she is. So which is it though? Like, it's double speak in both ways. Which is it? She's a Latina bartender from the Bronx who shouldn't be where she is, or she's a fake, overly educated liberal who knows exactly what she's doing, but also somehow is unqualified for the moment. Like, I don't understand. Like, they don't understand either. But that's what they go with. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, for me, Sandy Cortez, the way he says it just sounds like an old-timey baseball player. You know, it's just a very weird thing to become obsessed with. I mean, we know what qualifies her to have an opinion in, politics. If in their mind, it's like that people say the things that they want to hear them say, right? We don't hear this kind of like delegitimizing talk about what Lauren Boebert, who owned the bar, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was like the CrossFit trainer, or any of that stuff. And you can say it's because they technically own small businesses, but more than anything, it's because everyone is kind of just looking for that echo chamber. So they don't mind pivoting back and forth between, you got to have this unearned deference for, like, I guess Harvard economists who work at the Fed, but also like sort of like hate them because they're not down to earth, like Smallville type farmers. It's I think much more transparent that a lot of their ideology is just held together, especially when it comes to her, or a lot of just generally held together by like a type of just antagonism towards women, antagonism towards people of color, antagonism towards the poor, the working poor, urban centered like minorities, any number of antagonisms.
But to be fair, Brandon, I was told by Jimmy Dore that AOC also owned the bar that she worked at, so.
Right.
Well, I mean, hopefully it was actually just a front for like a communist party revolution.
Yeah, well, I mean, you weren't supposed to say that out loud, dude.
The funny thing is
reverse psychology, double reverse psychology.
Right.
The funny thing is you brought up like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene and how they ignore their like their bona fides to be where they are. But like, this is, it's extra funny though when you find out that Lauren Boebert, that restaurant she owns and runs, she's basically able to do that because her husband is like some high-level executive at an energy company and breaks in almost $1 million a year.
Yeah, and Marjorie Taylor Greene got that from her dad, her business.
She owns her dad. She now owns her dad's construction company. So, and that's where her money comes from. And she also took quite a hefty amount of money out of that, the PPP loans, which still unsure where that went. I believe some of it went to, her campaign somehow, if I recall reading that correctly. But these guys are always love to play both sides here. They have the working class, small business owner mentality, but don't tell anybody that we're actually only able to do all this stuff because we all had it handed down to us on a silver platter by who we were born from or who we ended up marrying.
Well, I mean, they're obsessed with that faux meritocracy that they think people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez like disrupt by pointing out that racism is real. And so, you have Dave Rubin on with the heir to the Hot Pocket fortune talking about how like some people have never had real jobs. And, Dave Rubin has been hosting comedy shows for the past 20 years. I watched a comedy special with him that was like from the early 2000s a few weeks ago. Right. And so it's all just in service of pretending that comedy and like air quotes, I suppose, it's all in service of pretending that a meritocracy that they both disprove by being there, but also desperately want to maintain exists is still functional. Right. And just acknowledging that, we live in a racist, classist like society disrupts their ability to pretend like the reason that like Meghan McCain is on TV is because she has a lot of great insights into the world.
Not for long.
Wait, has she quit yet? Actually, I totally forgot to check into that. It's been like
they may not be around in the summer. The View people, like it might be one of those. Take some time off in the summer.
Well, good for them. It's Labor Day next week.
Oliver Wendell Holmslice, Emma Vigeland, once in a generation radio talent. Even though the same thing was said about Sam, thank you for carrying my fantasy political commentator team to the playoffs. Oh, that was a reference to earlier. Freedom Poutine, Boebert's restaurant famously gave dozens of people diarrhea at a county fair or something.
Not at a county fair. So Lauren Boebert's 1776 steakhouse or whatever the fuck it's called.
No, it's called the Shooters because it's got guns all over.
Yeah. So, to get you diarrhea. That's why it's called Shooters.
You get the shooter somewhere.
They were catering an event and they didn't have any sort of licensing or basic sort of equipment like hot storage or sanitation or towels or tongs even. Yeah. And they were catering someplace and I think up to 80 reports of food poisoning, including bloody stool, and 100% of the people who made the calls had the pork sliders. So
that's if you're starting an Oregon Trail campaign, don't let Lauren Boebert be the chef. Is what they're.
Well, I just want to add that it's because it's like so on the nose. It's unbelievable. Lauren Boebert's restaurant, Shooter's Grill, is located in Rifle, Colorado. I mean,
Nug Wrangler, Candace Owens didn't even deny the claims that she downplayed COVID and masks. KEKW. What? Misfit Black Girl, I don't know. Pretty ridiculous that Candace Owens thinks it was black people's opinions that is why they were discriminated against. It's pretty funny. Eye roll. Pretty cringe to be concerned about spoilers. Sorry. Fabucat 58.
I was joking actually, but it's fine.
Yeah, well, same. Hedges had a great appearance on Michael Moore's podcast Rumble. Everything's named Rumble. I've never been his fan, but was moved by his spirituality. Okay. Ron Johnson's late night dump. Matt, did you ever end up debating Tim Pool, or did you get cold feet just like Sam?
Yeah, I got cold feet. I ran away. I wasn't sure if I could stand up to the facts that are found in the Daily Mail. No, I mean, he said he would have me on, and he said he'd have someone reach out to me, and that never happened. And then I got to reach back out. Maybe, I'm benefit of the doubt. Things happen. I mean, I could have reached out again. I will do that, but we'll see. I'll let you guys know after I reach out what's going on there.
Try not to drown in the intellectual pool that is Tim Pool.
Emma's Night Shyamalan. We should make the COVID test free for anybody who buys a gay wedding cake. Problem solved. Freedom Poutine. Unbreakable is Shyamalan's best. Okay. Glasses to see.
I think that's a defensible position. That's a good position.
It's a really great movie, but he's got other great ones too, like The Village.
Okay.
Jesus. Denver Dave, tell not a Dr. Joe Rogan and his meathead listeners that vaccines are medicine. Yeah. Champagne Communista, purely anecdotal, but I've been at a maskless dinner with my running group 2 weeks in a row now where someone a few days later tests positive for COVID. Most of them are vaxxed, but the one who brought the virus to the table was unvaxxed. Luckily, I tested negative both weeks, and I took the Moderna vaccine back in April, but I don't want to keep putting it to the fire test, so I won't be going anywhere maskless indoors and going to any more maskless indoor events anytime soon. Yeah, I hear that. And apparently there's some indications that Moderna might, this I think is based on their own research, and so we got to still see, but Moderna might be providing with a little bit better immunity than me and the Pfizer gang. So
Nailed it.
Are you Moderna, Brandon?
Absolutely.
Damn it.
Yeah, I got Moderna too. Someone actually even called into my show who has a medical background and explained how Moderna also is the more ethical of all the companies that are involved with making vaccines.
I don't know about all that, but I know that I have it, so I feel an automatic bias towards it.
I mean, that's kind of how it works. Piglet needs a quad track. Piglet needs a squat rack.
Are you reading people's license plates? They write it
it's one word that's their handle. So I can't figure it out. But Piglet needs a squat rack is kind of funny. In World of Warcraft, the opposing factions couldn't understand what each other typed, so LOL became KEK in the chat to each other. I don't know where the W came from, but that evolved over time. But KEKW means it's the same essentially as LOL. Drew, someone get John Taffer to Shooter's Grill.
Yeah, we can't use John Taffer anymore though. I used to like that show, Bar Rescue. It's a great show, honestly.
And maybe
I know, but he'd be pretty mad about the diarrhea caused.
Maybe he should only go to Republican restaurants then. Let them
You did what?
I don't know. He might respect her because she's a Republican. Remember, he went on what's her face's show on Fox News and said that.
Yeah, no, I agree, Matt. The Ingram thing about let's coerce our workers, and if you rewatch, I have been watching Bar Rescue, and he likes to go in and fire people, for eating on the job or stuff like that, just one thing, and he'll but he also does take the food safety stuff extremely that's why I like the show, because one, I like to see managers and owners get called incompetent in front of their staff, not very
Because
important.
if anyone's ever worked at a small like restaurant or bakery or
Yep.
any sort of food place, if you watch that show, you know like you just feel like you're transported back to when you worked there, because it is the experience I've had. Everyone I know have people who run small restaurants and have that mindset of being an entrepreneur or whatever. They usually absolutely 100% suck at what they do.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about the show. But then, in light of the Ingram thing, you do notice that, he wants to fire staff all the time as soon as he walks in the door.
Yeah, I mean, he was never a liberal. I mean, obviously he's a big pro small business kind of guy. It's just
Pretty sure
amazing.
you could say it by just looking at him. He's not a liberal.
Exactly.
He's from Vegas.
Yeah.
But
you can to me though, it was like the length he went with the dog comment. Do you remember that? Basically saying like, he said like, this isn't even accurate either. People who were in the military came out and said, we don't do that because then they won't listen to us. But he said, in the military, they starve the dogs when they're teaching them because they don't reward them unless they have an incentive to do so. So that's what we have to do. We can't feed them until they do what we want them to do. Talking about workers.
I mean, I was going to say, like, obviously his comments are indefensible, and he's always been a small business kind of person. I think what you can look at the show, if nothing else, an example of how, like, the illusion of the competent small business owner is just that. Like, it's largely like an illusion. A lot of these people are like not only they are entrepreneurs, so they try to like combine the worst aspects of like, artists with like small business owners with like they're like creative type, but also like those like worst MBA graduates you've ever met. And just showing how low the bar is for some of the places in like America makes me feel like I never want to eat at a bar ever again. Like the whole bug
Agreed.
in the whole bug in the alcohol bottle thing, that was like disgusting. Right.
Yeah, I mean, those kitchens, you wonder how like your experiences getting bar food hasn't like put you in the hospital after watching that show.
Yeah,
it's just like, we don't need, you can have a critique of capitalism, and you definitely should, but like as many people have pointed out, like, a critique of small business like as a concept, like what it does to communities or whatever, it's one thing, but we don't even have like functioning small businesses because of like our lax standards, which is a whole separate issue.
Matt, would there be any way you could do the shofar? We're getting some requests. Sorry, when Sam's not here, Matt has to stand up to do the shofars over by Sam's desk. And we're just going to do a few more of these and get out of here. Sorry, guys. We spent like 30 minutes on M. Night Shyamalan.
We did not spend 30. It gets longer every time.
That's the twist. It gets longer every time.
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's how old ends,
I got to see that one still. Well, did you see it? Was it any good?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, we're doing shofars. Governor HVAC. Hey, I'm our crew. Can I get a shofar for my girlfriend, Kelly? It's her 31st birthday today, and despite our best efforts, we had to cancel all plans due to catching COVID. Left is best. Yeah. Kelly, happy birthday. Stellar Vision. I'm trans and just started hormone replacement therapy. Can I get a chauffeur and a shofar? No chauffeur, but we'll give you a shofar. And last shofar here, Wood Wizard. Hey guys, can I get a shofar for my wife Kayla? She has anxiety about the vaccines because of all this crazy misinformation despite my pleas. She has some heart issues and is susceptible to seizures. Today, she sent me a message at work saying she was going to get the vaccine. So to those out there with loved ones caught in this bubble, don't give up on giving out info, even if the talks are hard. We have 3 kids and live in Boise, Idaho, so her anxiety about COVID has finally suppressed anxiety about newer medications. Thank the universe. Left is best.
I gotta ask, if you don't mind, please share more about that process and how you were able to get through to your wife who, like you said, read all this misinformation and was against the vaccines, and you seem to have convinced her to go do it. I think having more info might be very helpful to people who are in similar positions as you.
Yes. I mean, I do think that of the people I know in my family adjacent who haven't been vaccinated yet, I think anxiety is like some of the through lines I'm seeing, and like lack of information. So hopefully at least this can move the needle somewhat.
Yeah. And I think the model of don't expect to change somebody's mind in any given moment or conversation. Just continue to be there with the information when they are looking for it. And I think that's the only way. It's sort of like erosion. A steady drip is the only way you can influence people that way.
That's great advice. All right, guys, we're not going to be able to take any calls. We're just going to do a few more IMs and then get out of here.
Wood was the person who said that they have the wife with who's going to get the vaccine said they can call in now. Do you want to take it, or we don't have time for that?
I'm sorry, man. We don't have time for that.
Can you call into my show tonight? YouTube.com/Matt Binder. I'll give you just have Skype on your phone. I would love to talk to you and talk about it tonight.
All right, Wood Wizard, do that. That would be awesome. Dr. Gus DVM, a friend that is an elementary school teacher in Tampa, tried to open her classroom door to improve ventilation for kids to keep their masks on. When the AC broke and the school security made her close it because it's against school shooter safety. Peak Florida. Oh my God.
It's just all of our like worst things converging at once, like
yes,
climate change, disease, and like school shootings. You know, it's America in a bubble, I guess.
Grill Sergeant. Chelsea Manning has publicly announced she wants to return all money Glenn Greenwald has donated to her. Greenwald's response is pretty disturbing. I saw that. He gratuitously mentioned her suicide attempts. He's, I don't know.
You can see who he's sort of coordinating his responses with. The kind of, like I said, the greasy DM of, I think, reactionaries.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Between the 101 on the 5, Joe Rogan selling uninstitutionally recognized supplements to bring you unheard of health benefits. Who would have heard of such a thing? Right. All right, guys. Final IM of the day. Thanks so much. It was a fun show today, and I really appreciate everyone's support. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, other Matt, who knows who I was referring to, and thank you to Bradley. Appreciate it, guys. See you all tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and